A fragile ceasefire holds across the Gaza Strip, but the end of large-scale bombing has not brought an end to suffering. The war may have paused, but daily life for more than 2 million Palestinians remains defined by scarcity, loss, and a deep uncertainty about what the future may look like. Entire neighborhoods lie in ruins, infrastructure is shattered, and a humanitarian system already strained by years of blockade now struggles under the immense weight of need. Food is limited, drinking water is contaminated or difficult to access, and families displaced from their homes have erected makeshift shelters wherever land is open. For many, tents stitched from tarps and plastic sheets have become the new normal. The return of relative quiet has illuminated the scale of devastation rather than easing its impact. Humanitarian convoys cross into Gaza, but in quantities far below what international organizations consider necessary. The United Nations and major international aid agencies have repeatedly stated that only a fraction of what is required is being allowed through. Relief trucks face logistical bottlenecks, movement restrictions, and layers of inspection that slow their entry. Hospitals are operational in only partial form, often staffed by exhausted medical teams working with limited supplies. Many Palestinians describe daily life not as post-war recovery, but as survival in a landscape still shaped by the war's aftermath. At the center of the ceasefire agreement brokered through Washington are commitments related to the Israeli captives still missing in Gaza. According to US officials, Hamas has agreed to locate and return the remains of 13 Israeli captives believed to have been killed during the conflict. The group is now coordinating with the International Committee of the Red Cross and Egyptian technical teams to search areas that remain under Israeli military oversight. Under the terms of the ceasefire, Israel has agreed to release the bodies of 15 Palestinians in exchange for each captive's remains returned. The arrangement marks one of the most sensitive components of the truce, the retrieval of the dead in a place where tens of thousands have been killed and thousands more remain beneath rubble. For months, local residents searched manually for loved ones, digging through collapsed concrete and steel with their hands, shovels, or improvised tools. The arrival of heavy machinery marks a painful acknowledgement that the number of bodies still unrecovered is immense, and the scale of loss is larger than initial estimates suggested. Egyptian teams trained in post-conflict remains recovery have now entered the enclave. They are accompanied by ICRC specialists accustomed to coordinating in war zones. Their task is complicated and slow. Much of Gaza's urban landscape has been rendered unrecognizable. Buildings have collapsed onto one another. Streets that once formed navigable grids are now winding paths through debris. Identifying specific coordinate points from before the war is often impossible. But the recovery teams are not searching only for Israeli captives. Beneath the rubble lie Palestinian civilians, parents, children, neighbors, whose families still hope for the chance to lay them to rest. This shared grief takes place in parallel, though the political systems surrounding each set of remains differ dramatically. To understand the broader dynamics shaping this moment, we turn to the geopolitical framework surrounding the ceasefire. After returning to office, US President Donald Trump introduced a 20-point Gaza stabilization and transition plan. Its goals include a phased Israeli military withdrawal, the introduction of a multinational stabilization force, a reorganization of Gaza's civil administration, and a long-term arrangement aimed at preventing Hamas from rebuilding its military capacity. While the plan has been formally endorsed by the White House, it remains a subject of debate within Israel and among Palestinians. Questions remain about who will oversee Gaza's governance in the transitional period, who will enforce security, and what role Hamas will play now that it remains a de facto political actor, even if its armed wing has been diminished. In our conversation with Middle Eastern politics lecturer Zan Alani, based at Georgetown University's Qatar campus, he explained that Israel's recent tactical adjustments must be understood through the lens of shifting regional and international pressure. He said, "It's not a surprise that Israel is changing its opinion and tactics lately, given that the momentum, the global and the regional momentum in ensuring that there would be a solution in a very fast-paced way doesn't really align with Israel's clear objectives for the past 2 years and ensuring that it can annex the Gaza Strip, ensuring that it would be the dominant political and military power that determines all these strategic elements. According to Alani, the political environment surrounding the ceasefire is evolving rapidly. He explained that the pace of diplomatic negotiations, regional mediation efforts, and the international push for de-escalation has limited Israel's to pursue long-term strategic aims that existed prior to the ceasefire. He continued stating, "It seems like the frequency of the developments in the past few months, and particularly in the past few weeks since the truce, and the peace talks has not been in favour for Israel's long-term objectives. It seems like there is a regional and an international, including the US, a political consensus that it only makes sense to recognise Hamas at least as a political entity that knows the future administration of Gaza, at least in the short term. It seems like Israel is not really in favour of this global and regional recognition of having to recognise and acknowledge that they will have to deal with Hamas as a political entity. That would be a part of the reconciliation period in the next few months." This assessment reflects a shift in diplomatic reality. While Israel has long sought to isolate Hamas politically, the ceasefire negotiations have forced its presence at the table, even if indirectly. And for international mediators, excluding a group that retains both governance capacity and local legitimacy would undermine any lasting agreement. We then asked what Israel is currently doing in the territory it still controls inside Gaza, particularly east of what has come to be known as the Yellow Line. Are Israeli forces conducting their own searches for captives' remains? How are internal dynamics unfolding among local Palestinian communities? Alani responded, "Militarily speaking, it's business as usual from the Israeli side. However, definitely the attacks are much more minimised if we were to compare it to the period prior to the peace summit in Sharm el-Sheikh." He noted that discussions around armed Palestinian rival clans and their political positioning have surfaced in recent months. He pointed out that the United States acknowledged that some of these clans were involved in illicit activities. He explained that this acknowledgement implied that neither Washington nor Israel is committed to permanently supporting these groups, and that the political landscape may be restructured during the transition period. Beyond immediate humanitarian relief and political negotiation, attention is now focused on the proposed international stabilization force, an external security contingent responsible for overseeing Gaza's transitional phase. The force has been outlined in President Trump's 20-point plan, but key questions remain unsettled. Which countries will participate? Who will command operations? How will authority be divided between local structures and foreign forces? Several countries have been mentioned as possible contributors, including Qatar, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Azerbaijan. Discussions are ongoing regarding whether forces from Arab League members with recent mediation roles will also participate. However, an obstacle remains. Israel has expressed reluctance to fully relinquish security control. Alani commented on this point directly. One thing that we know will be crucial to safeguarding any kind of fragile peace or stability in Gaza will be the formation of this international stabilization force. But then this comment from Benjamin Netanyahu recently, where he said that he envisions that full control and security within Gaza will still be essentially in the hands of the Israelis, or at least heavily influenced by the Israelis. This reflects a central tension. While the United States envisions a multinational stabilizing presence, Israel seeks to maintain final authority over any security apparatus operating near its borders. For Palestinians, the humanitarian crisis remains immediate and consuming. Entire families live in public facilities, empty structures or tents relying on rationed food distributions. Water scarcity is acute, and the risk of waterborne diseases increases as sanitation systems remain damaged. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, violence, land seizures, arrests and settlement expansion continue. Though global media focus has centred on Gaza, the dynamics shaping Palestinian life extend across territories. Alani addressed this broader picture, saying, "Politically speaking, the Israeli occupation and the illegal central colonial project continues to happen. It may be different in tactics way to ensure it sucks away the anger, the regional and international anger and enthusiasm in ensuring that there would be a solution to ensure that today will not be the same as it was prior to October 7th. In other words, while the war has forced new negotiations, structural realities remain unchanged. The risk is that short-term relief may not translate into long-term resolution. Looking ahead, the success of the ceasefire and the transition plan depends on several interdependent factors. whether Israel will agree to timelines for military withdrawal, whether Hamas will accept limits on its armed capacity without losing political standing, whether the international stabilization force will be empowered to act, whether humanitarian aid will scale to meet the population's needs, whether reconstruction will begin before political arrangements are finalized, whether Palestinians will have agency over the future administrative system. For families in Gaza, these are not abstract diplomatic questions. They shape whether tomorrow will be a day spent searching for water, waiting for fuel, standing in line for flour, or clearing rubble where homes once stood. The ceasefire is a pause, not a conclusion. The humanitarian crisis continues, political negotiations fluctuate. The work of recovering the dead remains at once urgent and symbolic, a reminder that the cost of this conflict will not be measured solely in territory or agreements, but in lives irreversibly changed. As Gaza navigates this uncertain transition, one reality remains. Any durable solution must address not only the cessation of violence, but the conditions that allowed it to take hold. Without meaningful reconstruction, economic investment, political representation, and a framework that protects civilian life, peace will remain fragile and suffering will continue to define daily existence.